The day Marcus decided to give away everything he owned. He wasn't thinking about heroism or redemption. He was thinking about the woman at the bus stop who'd smiled at him, despite the rain soaking through her. Threadbare coat, the same coat she'd been wearing every morning for 3 months. He was thinking about how that simple smile had cracked, something open inside his chest, something he'd kept carefully locked since the accident that took his daughter 2 years ago. He was thinking that maybe, just maybe, if he could make one person's life a little less heavy, the weight crushing his own heart might ease up enough to let him breathe again. Marcus had been a different man once. Before the accident, he'd been the guy who worked 80-hour weeks at his tech startup, who measured success in funding rounds and market valuations, who'd promised his 8-year-old daughter he'd make her soccer game next week. Always next week. Then one rainy Tuesday, there was no next week. There was only the phone call, the hospital corridor, and the awful silence that followed him home to a house, suddenly too big and too quiet. His company had sold 6 months later for $23 million, and Marcus had felt nothing. The money sat in his account like a tombstone, marking everything he'd lost while chasing everything that didn't matter. The woman's name was Patricia, though he didn't know that yet. She was 57 years old and worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices downtown from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, then stocking shelves at the grocery store from 8 until 2 in the afternoon. She slept in 4-hour shifts and hadn't bought herself new clothes in 3 years because her grandson needed medication that her insurance barely covered. Her smile at the bus stop wasn't just a smile. It was an act of defiance against a world that kept taking and taking, a declaration that she still had something left to give. Marcus started small. He bought coffee for everyone in line behind him at the coffee shop. He paid for a stranger's groceries when her card declined. He left $100 bills in library books and taped to gas pumps. Each small act felt like pulling splinters from a wound he hadn't known how to heal, but it wasn't enough. The money kept piling up, earning interest, multiplying like it was mocking him. His daughter's college fund untouched. The house they'd never filled with the siblings she'd wanted. All of it just sitting there, useless. Then one morning, Patricia wasn't at the bus stop. Marcus stood in the rain, feeling foolish for the worry that gripped him. He didn't know this woman. They'd never spoken beyond her friendly good mornings and his awkward waves. But for 3 months, her presence had been the one reliable thing in his shapeless days. The next morning, she wasn't there either. On the 3rd day, Marcus did something he'd spent 2 years avoiding. He reached out. He asked. The bus driver knew her. Everyone knew Patricia. "She's in the hospital," the driver said, his face grave. "Heart attack." She was working her night shift. Pushed herself too hard trying to finish. Early to make it to her grandson's school play. Marcus stood on that corner long after the bus pulled away. The rain had stopped, but he didn't notice. He was remembering another hospital, another vigil, another moment when he'd realized how fragile everything was. But this time, something was different. This time, he could do something. The hospital room was generic and sterile, filled with the quiet beeping of machines. Patricia's grandson, a thin boy of about 10, sat in the corner chair, his school play costume still visible under his jacket. An older woman, Patricia's sister, stood by the window, her face creased with worry and exhaustion. Marcus knocked gently, feeling like an intruder in their private grief. "I'm Marcus," he said. "I ride the same bus as Patricia. I just wanted to check on her." The sister looked at him, with the wary exhaustion of someone who'd been disappointed too many times to trust easily. But the boy looked up with his grandmother's eyes, and Marcus saw something in them that made his throat tight. Hope. The kind of hope his daughter used to have before he'd let her down one too many times. "The surgery went well," the sister said carefully. "But the bills. Lord, the bills. And she'll be out of work for months. I don't know how we're going to manage." Marcus pulled out his phone. He'd spent 2 years paralyzed, frozen by grief and guilt. But standing in that hospital room, looking at this family held together by a woman who smiled at strangers even when her own life was falling apart, something shifted. His thumbs moved across the screen, transferring money, making calls, sending emails to lawyers and accountants he'd been ignoring for months. "Her medical bills are paid," he said quietly. "All of them, including the medication for your grandson." The room went silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. The sister's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that? You don't even know us." "Your sister smiles at me every morning," Marcus said, his voice rough. "Even in the rain. Even when she's exhausted, she still finds it in herself to be kind to a stranger. That's worth more than you know." But he wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, as Patricia recovered, Marcus kept working. He paid off the rest of their debts. He set up a trust fund for the grandson's education and medical care. He bought Patricia's sister a reliable car to replace the one that broke down more often than it ran. And he did it all quietly through lawyers and anonymous donations, because this wasn't about recognition. It was about something else entirely. What Marcus didn't expect was the chain reaction. Patricia's story got out, not because he wanted it to, but because the hospital social worker had never seen anything like it. A local news station picked it up. Then another. Soon Marcus's phone was ringing with people wanting to share their own stories, their own needs, their own moments of desperation. And for the first time since his daughter died, Marcus felt something other than the crushing weight of guilt. He felt purpose. He created a foundation in his daughter's name, not just for big donations, but for the small things that break people. The car repair that costs more than they have. The electricity bill that means choosing between power and food. The school supplies that separate kids from their peers. He hired people who understood poverty not as a concept, but as a lived experience. Patricia became his first employee when she was well enough to work again, helping identify families who needed help and were too proud to ask for it. The day Patricia came back to the bus stop, Marcus was waiting. She moved slower now, more carefully, but that smile was still there. When she saw him, her eyes lit up. "I hear you've been busy," she said. Marcus laughed, a sound that felt rusty but real. "I learned from the best. Someone taught me that kindness doesn't cost anything, even when you don't have anything to spare." "Oh, honey," Patricia said, and there were tears in her eyes now, too. "I wasn't being kind to you because I had something to give. I was being kind because you looked like you needed someone to see you, really see you." And that's when Marcus understood. All this time, he thought he'd been saving her, but she'd been saving him first. Her smile hadn't been charity. It had been recognition. One broken person seeing another and refusing to look away. The foundation grew. Hundreds of families helped. Thousands of small kindnesses multiplied across a city, a state, a country. But Marcus never forgot that it started with a smile in the rain, with a woman who had every reason to be bitter choosing kindness instead. He never forgot that. Humanity isn't measured in grand gestures, but in the daily decision to see each other, to acknowledge each other's humanity even when everything else is falling apart. On the 2-year anniversary of the foundation, Marcus stood at the podium with Patricia beside him. He looked out at the crowd of donors and recipients, of people who'd been helped and people who'd learned to help, and he thought about his daughter. She would have been 10 now, the same age as Patricia's grandson. He couldn't bring her back. He couldn't undo his failures as a father. But he could honor her memory by doing what he should have done when she was alive. He could show up. He could be present. He could choose every single day to see the people around him and recognize their worth. "This isn't my story," Marcus said into the microphone. "It belongs to every person who's ever smiled through their pain, who's ever chosen kindness when the world gave them every reason not to. It belongs to Patricia, who saw a broken stranger and decided he was worth a smile. And it belongs to everyone here who believes that we're better together than we are alone." Later, as the crowd dispersed and the evening settled into night, Marcus and Patricia stood outside in the cool air. Somewhere in the city, their foundation was paying an electricity bill, buying groceries for a struggling family, giving someone the chance to keep going for one more day. It wasn't enough to fix everything, but it was enough to matter. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. Patricia took his hand, her grip strong despite everything she'd been through. "Thank you for letting me help you. That's what we're here for, you know? To help each other find our way back." And standing there in the darkness, Marcus finally understood what his daughter had been trying to teach him all along. Life isn't about the big moments or the grand achievements. It's about the small choices we make every day, the smile we offer, the hand we extend, the decision to see another person's humanity and honor it with our own. That's where we find redemption. That's where we find our way back to ourselves. That's where we find home.